Hi everyone, and welcome to this new video. Today I will show you how to declare libraries in the Flow Plus application. In a previous video, I showed how to add in Cubase and the Vienna Ensemble Pro, the new library, and in that case I was using the Spitfire Abbey Road 1. And in this video I'm going to continue the work by adding one track from that library in Flow Plus. This video described the manual process of adding libraries, which is much easier than the previous way of coding with Lemur, but still requires some work to be done in JSON configuration files. In the coming weeks, I will release some new products to generate all this data programmatically. So keep an eye on my store and subscribe to my channel to be informed of any news. When you purchase the professional version, you already have a lot of data that you can reuse. Let's say that probably 50% of what you need is already there. In this video, I'm not going deeper into technical details of how the JSON are built or the specification of those files. For this, you can just navigate to my website and go to the documentation section and check this post, Flow Plus Technical Documentation, that explains in all details the content of the JSON file and how, for example, you could change things like, for example, you could change the color of the folders from this attribute here, the name is here, and so on and so on. So here is really you got all the details you need to understand the coding which is behind Flow Plus. So when you purchase the Flow Plus, you actually get a folder which contains already a lot of data. Here it is. And here, as you can see, you have all the articulations which are used in the form of files. You have all the expression maps. Each of them is one single file. To build your new library, I suggest that you create a new folder, that you give it the name of the library you are creating. And inside you create this folder structure where you have all those different pieces. So articulations, expression maps, faders, folder, instruments, libraries, tracks, and vendors. And you make sure that there is nothing inside. This way, actually, what you're doing is that you are creating a separate folder with all the content that is needed to manage that library. Then in the end, you will just need to take all this content and copy inside the other folder that is the one that is managed by the Flow Plus application, so that they will see that file. So why then create this folder here? It's just because of modularity. So it's good that you have one folder that you know that pack all the files that are needed for that library, so that maybe, for example, one day you want to create a template where you just have a couple of libraries, you just copy the content from here inside the other one, and then Flow Plus will just show that specific content. And it's also because, for example, when I will be upgrading Flow Plus, adding more libraries, it will be easier for you to just know actually everything that you have done on your side, and you just can copy this one on top of the one of Flow. So let's start here. As we said, we are going to use this track here from Cubase, and once the folders are put in place, the first one for which we are going to add content is the folder called vendors. And as the name speaks, here you're going to put the name of the vendor that is providing that library. So navigate into the full data here, and actually for this one it's quite simple. You will just do copy the Spitfire audio, which is the one here. You go there and you paste it inside. So now you are just declaring that your library is sold by Spitfire audio. So next things to do is with the folders. In the folders here, you will need to add objects which are all related to the folders in Cubase that contains the tracks that you want to add. So in that specific case, we are going to add this one here, and this one here is located under the brass family high. As you can also see from the name, BFH. So what we need to do then is to again go in the folder that contains all the data, locate the B, the brass family and the brass family high, and copy those and paste them inside your library folder. Of course, in that case today we are just looking at one track. Actually, you should do this for all the folders where there is a MIDI track inside. Next things to do is with the instruments. So for all MIDI tracks that you want to add, you need to identify the instrument which is behind that, and you need to copy inside the instruments folder. So for that one, pretty simple. So we are going to add the horns. So it will be the horn instrument. We go here, and in the long list of instruments, you can see that I find the b.horn, which means brass.horn. I copied that file and I put it inside here. So now we have just declared that there will be a horn instrument in our library. Okay, so far it was pretty simple. Now is the moment to go a bit into the most complex part, which is the one actually that makes the communication with Cubase, with the concept of the MIDI events, the generic remote, and the presets. We will do that with the libraries folder. So here, as name speak, you will need to create one file which contains all the information related to the library we are going to add. I suggest not to start from scratch, but instead I'm going to copy this one, which is the Spitfire Albion 5 library, and paste it here inside and start to work on this. To do that, you need an editor which is able to format the JSON data. In my case, I'm using NetBeans. So here is the file. This is the one from Spitfire Albion 5. Okay, before actually editing, before editing, we should change the name. The name of the file should be equal to the name of the library. So here it is. Now we open it again. And here it's this. So let's start tweaking the content of this file. First of all, the identification of the object has to be equal to the name of the library. The ID also. The name here is the one that will be actually shown inside Flow Plus. The vendor ref, when you see ref in the end, it means that is a reference to another object through the ID of that object. So here we need to put the reference, the ID of the vendor. So in that case, so we are going there and we can open it. The ID of the vendor that we use is SA, Spitfire Audio, and that's it, that's the right one. Next, the section ref is a reference to a section, which in our case, so where we can find this data, it's here in System, Sections. So we just open that one. And you can see here, you have strings, choir. These typically are the same ones that you find here in Flow Plus. So orchestra, woodwinds, brass, percussion, strings. So in that case, the Abbey Road one is an orchestra library, because it's one library that contains multiple sections. So in that case, I put them inside the category orchestra. And so then what we do is that we take this ID here. Where is it? Orchestra here. So we copy that one and we put it there, which is already the case. All right. The order here, that's the order that actually will define so the order of visualization of that library inside Flow Plus. In that case, this number is linked to Albion 5. So if we go there, so it's this number that is the order of this one. So if you want, for example, to make it appear right after this one, I mean, just put one number more and it will be appearing right after this one. Then we need to remove this part here and add here a list separated by comma of reference to instruments. So which instruments are we adding so far? It was the horn here, and the ID is this one. So we just copy this and we put it here. So what we are saying here is that actually we are declaring that this library has as these instruments in one of each MIDI track. Next things is that we are going to empty this list here, and we are going to keep it empty for the moment, and then later on we will need to add the Cubase MIDI tracks that we create. And the same here, if we go add instruments, let's not forget to add them in that list. As soon as there is no Cubase track reference added here, this library will not show up in Flow Plus. Next things to do is the object quick controls. So as you can see, it's an array made of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 faders, which is exactly the 8 faders that you can see in the quick controls here in Cubase. So these are always in Flow Plus, these are standard and are always set to certain values. The only one that might change from a library to the other are those ones, because it's so we have the CC22, CC23 and CC24, which in most of the library from Spitfire Audio, this is the close, the tree and the ambient mix, but it's not always the case. And for example, it is not the case for this library here, where we can see that the first 3 microphones for, okay, with the right click, CC22, CC23 and CC24. So these are the mix 1, the mix 2 and the vintage 1. So what we need to do here is that we need to declare, so for the last 3 ones, those other microphones. So as you can see here in the quick controls, you have an attribute which is called fader reference. So again, this is the ID of a fader that we are referencing by ID. So we need just to make sure that all those are also in our folder. So how to do that? Let's go in the database here. You can see there is a folder called faders. And let's go in that folder and look for all those ones. So we have the CC1 dynamics, and here it is. We have the CC11 expression. We have the CC21 vibrato, and here it is. We have the CC10 pan, and here it is, and the CC7 volume, and here it is. And then we have okay, let's start by copy those things and put them inside the faders folder of our library. So here it is. And then we say that for the microphone, we don't want to take the close tree and ambient. That's not actually how it works, but we want so the mix 1, mix 2. So let's see first of all if those already exist, or otherwise you will need to create them. So for the mix 1, you see that you already have it here. So CC2, and so we can simply close it, copy it, and paste it here. And here we put like the reference. So CC2. Let's see if it's the case also for the 20. Yes, it is here the case. So I just copy the name and put it here. And just do not forget to copy and paste it in my faders folder. And the last one, it was the CC24 vintage. So I see that this is not there. So what we need to do is to create it. How to create a new object? It's very simple. I do suggest to so copy and paste it. Change the name to be the one. Okay, let's be careful here. The -f needs to be at the end. So here it was CC25 microphone underscore vintage 1. So check out sorry, that is wrong. So check out the technical specification to see what does it mean, the naming convention. And just now that we can open it here. We can start to modify. So this is no, this should be 24M vintage 1. The same should be here. This is the name that will be shown in Flow. So we are going to take a nice name. The control change is the 24. The default value for this one is 0. And then it is a microphone, true. That's all you have to do. So now what we have done, what we can do, we can come back on our library there and we can say, so this will be 24M vintage 1. And we are sure that when we are adding this reference, that there is an object that exists that has the same name here and the same name here. Okay, so that's fine. Now we need to tackle this part, which is probably the most complex one, which is actually the one that requires also some work done on Cubase. I explain you what. So here, as you can see, when, for example, you have we have actions that are linked to a specific object. So if I say here, Spitfire Albion 5, okay, let me take one that is here. Spitfire BBC, where is it here? I want to hide it. So if I click here on hide, you will see that the BBC Trumpets A3, which is here, will simply disappear. And that's because there is a logical preset which has been created to hide that track. And through the actions that is clicked in Flow Plus and the generic remote, we invoke that preset. So you have two things to do at this time. You will need to create the generic remote and the logical preset. Let's start by creating the logical presets. So for that specific object of library, you will need to create 3 events. One that shows everything which is linked to that library, one that hides everything which is linked to that library, and one that hides everything which is not linked to that library. So those are the 3 presets that you will need to create. So if we go there and we open Project Logical Editor, we can load in the template. And you can see that the content appears. So what you need to do now is that for that one, you need to change this content here and you put the right value and you save it. So in that case is this. It will say exist, yes. So now what we have done, we have saved this generic remote, and this generic remote is going to show that track. And you will have to do that for all the 3 that are declared here. So do for the template of the show, of the hide, and the filter not. In the end, you will see that you will have created all those generic remotes. So here they are. And I highly suggest you that you copy them and you put them outside of the Flow folder in like your custom folder, like I already did here, so that whenever you receive an upgrade from Flow, even if you remove the content of that folder, it will not touch what you have already done. Okay, once you have created all the generic remotes that you need for your new library, which in this case, as I said, these are 3, so the show, the hide, and the filter not, you will need to instruct the generic remote to be able to trigger that specific action when there is the button on Flow Plus which is clicked. How to do that is through the generic remote. So go in Studio Setup, generic remote. Actually here what you need to do is to go in the generic remote that is set with the flow 1 out and create 3 new entries, so 1, 2, and 3. So, and then you can name them, so with the name of the action, for example. All right, and then you should set what is the MIDI channel that triggers that preset, what is the value. And I highly suggest you to use, for example, the MIDI channel 15, because on my side, I'm starting from 0 and I'm going increasing. So if you use the 15, it will be pretty okay. So you put 0, 1, and 2. So we have created actually 3 different actions. And then here below, You also have the 3 of them. You need to put all of them to command. Process project logical editor. And then here you choose the action which corresponds to what you want. So that was the show, and then it is. That was the height, and there it is. That was the filter nodes, and there it is. Apply, and the game is done. So now you will have your generic remote, which will react to those buttons here and trigger the logical preset. The final things to do, of course, and we need to again reopen that one. So let's put it here, is to map those with flow. So we say that the show is on the channel 15.0. So here we are going to put channel 15 value 0. The height is on 15.1. So here I'm going to say 15.1. And the filter node is 15.2. All right, everything is done for the library. So as you can see, again, we just set some basic things, and then we have added the new faders. We set up the quick controls, and here we have created 3 different logical presets. And in generic remote, we declare the value and the MIDI channel that triggers that, and we have set it right here. The next things to be done is to create a new track. In that case, we are going to create a new track for this one here. So again, I will suggest you to just go here in the data tracks and take one of them and copy. So we are going to, for example, copy this one here. We put it there, and now you can edit. All right. Well, again, before editing, I should change the name of the file, which has to be equal to the track here. Well, okay. And now we can edit. So here, the very first things that you have on top is the MIDI channel, value 1 and value 2, that Cubase sends to identify the track. How to see that? It's simply here. Every track has a MIDI sense, and in the MIDI send you see that there is a MIDI channel set, and then there is a value 1 and a value 2. And this identifies the track. So in Flow, I'm using again number from MIDI channel 1 going up. So I highly suggest that when you do your tweak, your custom code, you just go, for example, for the 16, so that we avoid clashes. So in that case, I'm keep on using the 1. So here we say that this is 1, 403. So here I'm going to say this is 1, 403. Voila. So now we know, now when we receive that message, Flow Plus will know that this is exactly the type of object that it will have to be received. So what we are going to do here, first of all, we change this one. We change here the name in Cubase. It has to be equal to the name of Cubase. Here the name. Okay, so there is, don't forget that there is a space before. So here is just the name like that without the folder, and here is the ID. And typically the convention is that the ID never have spaces, but instead you have an underscore. That's it. Then the library reference, again, if we look at the library, the ID was this one. So we are going to put this one here. The reference of the folder that contains the MIDI track can be found here. So it's this one. So you just copy and paste it. This is the order that will show the track inside the list, so this you can tweak it later on. And then you have the mix and the faders, for which it is exactly the same principle that we have already seen before. So you need to have one fader object for each of the object that you declare here, and then here you put the ID. So in that case, we are going to use the faders, so the microphones that are there, so mix 1, mix 2, vintage 1. We are going to do only the first 3 ones. So, okay, this one was mix 1. The second one was mix 2. This one was all right. And I already know that those 3 are part of my faders here, because I already did that before. And then the same, you have to do it for the faders. So the dynamics, expression, release, tightness, reverb, and volume, which if we look at the library here, this is exactly what you have. So you have the reverb on 19, you have the release on 16, tightness on 18, and vibrato on 21, but well, this is not used, so we don't need it. So let's just make sure that also all those ones are part of our database here. So we go in the big one where you have everything. The CC1 and CC11, we already took them. So now we need the CC17 release, CC18 tightness, CC19 reverb. So here they are. So I just copy those and paste them here, so that now I'm sure that those are also part of my library, since I'm referencing them from here. And then finally we have the reference to the instrument that we have here, which is this one. And then last things is also on the MIDI events. It's exactly the same concept, but for example, for the track, you can see that now there is only one. You don't need to have 3. So you have to do exactly the same thing. You have to go in Cubase. You have to go there. Where is it now? No, sorry. So you have to go there. Flow in the templates. You have the template for track to show. You can see, and then here in this parameter 1, you will need to copy exactly this content that is exactly the name of the track, and then you can save it with a specific name. And again, you go in the studio setup on the generic remote, and this time for the tracks you should use instead the generic remote with the flow 2. So that is this one. And again, just create a new one, add a new polypressure, and maybe start from the channel 15 and then reference that generic, that logical preset, exactly like we did for the folders. And last thing to do, copy this ID of this object. And now we can go back in our library, and we can say in the Cubase track reference, we can add this one that says my library is actually composed of this MIDI track. And that's already the first step, so we can already look at what does it brings. We can now go here, we can copy the full content of our library, and we can paste it inside the data folder of Flow Plus. All right, so some files will be replaced, of course, because we know we are using the same. I'm now stopping Flow Plus, adding it again, and now you will see that in the list of libraries I have Spitfire Abbey Road 1. And since we build also the all the actions of the generic remote, you will see that they will react. So again, let's open everything. So now with that button, I'm able to show only what is related to this one. And then also for the instruments, okay, there were no new instruments, but for example, if now I filter and say, show me only the horn, the track is there. And then also on the MIDI tracks, if for example now I filter with the content of Spitfire Abbey Road 1, you can see that my MIDI track is here. And now the last things that remains to do is the setting of the expression map. To do the expression map, you first need to have an expression map which is being created in Cubase here, and then so you just need to create yet another file. As you can imagine, there is a folder here called expression maps. So again, just go in an existing one, copy and paste it inside here. Give it the name that it should have for this expression map, and start to edit it here to modify. So that is the ID of the expression map. So this is the ID of the expression map, which is the same here. This is the name where you can have something without space. And then you have slots. Each slot identifies with one of the slots that you have here in the expression map. So for simplicity in this video, I'm going just to create maybe 2 of them, and then the rest it will be exactly the same. So as you can see here, they already have an order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the same order that you need to put here. So 0, 1, 0 stands for 1, and 1 stands for 2, of course. You have a color. Actually, this is the object. You see, it's a list separated by comma. Then you have the color, which actually is the one of the color that is available in Cubase. I think it's from 1 to 16. And then you have the output mapping that says how this expression map will be triggered. Where actually, I think in the next version, I'm going to make this part optional, because you might, for example, not to spend time editing those things. So if you do not want to do that, maybe just leave the value that is there. It will not have an impact. Otherwise, you can go and you can check for each of them which is the right one that is triggered, and you can set it here. So you can see this is the C -2, and the second one is F sharp -2. So I can say C -2 and F sharp -2. And then the articulations ref, it's again a reference to an articulation. In the data folder, so you can see in the articulations, you have a long list of articulations. Those are like 900 articulations which are already there. So you probably will not need to create a lot, because a lot are already here available. So we can see from the library here that the first articulation is long. Well, it's better to see here from Cubase. So the first articulation is the long one. So let's go here and let's check it. So where is long? Here it is. So we copy this one and we paste it inside the articulations folder. All right. And here we put the ID, and so we can always open to see what the ID is, but typically it's the same of the name, so it's long. And here we are going to put long. The second one is called swell long. So let's see if it's already in the database. We see that there is not swell long, but there is swell. We might be using this one, or eventually we might just create the one that we need. So we copy it, swell, and we paste it in our dataset for the library. We rename it, always, so never a space, but just with underscore and all uppercase, and we start to edit it. And here we can see, so very simple, swell long, the short name and the long name that will be shown in the app. So the short name can be like this, the long name can be like that. The order, actually, you don't really need it. I'm going to deprecate this attribute. And then this one is the information in Cubase, either if this is an attribute or direction. So you should check with Cubase, but I'm sure this is a direction in that case. And now that we have it, we can copy the ID and we can put it in the expression map. All right. I just noticed that I made a mistake here when I renamed the file, because this has to end with -x. All this information, it's available actually on the technical documentation, so I suggest to also have a look there. We have actually finished we can now test everything again. So what we do, we copy the content of our library and we put it into the application. So now we can stop it and launch again Flow. So you can already see that for the very first thing is if I click here, well, let me maybe put it smaller. You can see already that the content of the library is there with the two articulations that if I click on will make the switch of the articulation here, and of course also inside Vienna. So as I see it's well long, long, and long. That you can see that if I click here on the library and I show like the tracks, I can now click on the information and I can see the expression map. I can see the faders which are there and the microphones which are there. I can control the quick control, so you can see the mix 1, mix 2 and vintage 1 that we added, the microphone that we just added mix 1, mix 2 and vintage, and the controllers that we declare. So this is everything. Now just so if you want to add your libraries, you just need to have to iterate over the tracks and add all the tracks. You will see that at a certain moment you will not need to add much more articulations because they will be almost all there. And as you can see in Flow, there are already almost 900 available, and which is also increasing with the time. And maybe just to make a small recap of what we have done and what you need to do. So you need to create your folder of the library inside with that skeleton of folders. Then you start by copying or creating the vendor one. Then you continue with the folders, adding all the folders that contains your MIDI tracks. Then you continue with the instruments, adding all the instruments, or of course creating all the instruments that are part of your MIDI tracks. Then you continue with the libraries, and then here you edit the library like this, where you have the quick controls for which you will require to copy also the faders, and you have the MIDI events for which you will need to create 3 different presets and add 3 different entries in the generic remote. And then after you have done this, you can do the same with the tracks and create one track file per each track that you want to add in your library. And so voilà, also this is very straightforward. Those are all the faders that you also need to copy. This is just one MIDI events. And when you create a new track, just make sure that you also reference it here in the Cubase track reference and also with the instruments. And then in the end, you create also your expression map here, for which you might need to create new articulations or just reuse the ones which are already there. Okay, that's everything you need to know on how to customize Flow Plus. Be aware that actually I'm working on some products to make all these work done programmatically, so with just one application that create all those things with just one button. So if you are interested, if you are like one that plan to add a lot of libraries, then probably you will be interested in this application. But if you are just trying to add 1 or 2, I think you can perfectly do that with this manual process. So thank you for watching, and don't hesitate to come in the community, share your idea, and leave any feedback. Bye bye, and see you in the next video.